before you got into films, your background was just about as colorful as any movie.
Yeah, I started off with a medicine show. Medicine show is a platform out in an open field, and people stand around and you give a performance and then you sell the product. They call it television now.
And you went on into burlesque?
No, I went from there into John Lawrence Stock Company, from John Lawrence tent shows, from John Lawrence Stock Company into the minstrels, Clarence Stout's minstrels. My mother's uncle was Al G. Fields, who was a great minstrel man. So I got experience there too. Then from there I went with Hagenbeck and Wallace Circus as a clown. My father had been a clown with Hagenbeck and Wallace when he was a little boy and worked his way through school. And then he went on to teach at Valparaiso College in Valparaiso, Indiana. He was also an attorney. And he won a case. He lived in Vincennes, but he won a case in Indianapolis. He came home and he says to my mother, says, I'm giving up law. I'm as guilty as that man I defended today. I got him out of it, and he never studied law again. So he went into the grocery business. He had 5 stores, and they had 3 in Vincennes, 2 in Albany, Illinois, and 1 in Robeson, Illinois. And Mr. Gimble of the New York Gimbles lived in Vincennes at that time. And he wanted my father to go to New York with him, but he didn't go. He stayed in Vincennes.
And you had showbiz in your blood then?
Well, I guess that's where it went.
How did you end up in the movies?
In the movies? Well, I was in burlesque, and then I was with a walkathon, master of ceremonies with the walkathons. Then I was in vaudeville. My first picture was, I did 8 two-reel comedies for Warner Brothers at Avenue M in New York. And one night, Mr. Warner, Jack Warner, was making a speech, and he talked forever, you know. So I said to him, you're reading the first page again. Well, I got a big laugh from everybody there, and he says to me, you mess with me, I'll release those 8 comedies you did. He was a nice man. So then from those things, I went into having a wonderful time at RKO. And I did the donut dunking and going up and down stairs and all this stuff. And then I went back into vaudeville again for about a year. And then I went to MGM. First picture I did was a dramatic role, supposedly, but the audience kept laughing every time I did something, you know. So Frank Brzegi, the director, leaned forward in the theater and he says to Mr. Mayor, if you're smart, you'll sign this kid now, you know.
Was that one of the Dr. Kildare movies? Or?
No, I was in the Dr. Kildare pictures, though, with Lionel Barrymore and, yes.
What was MGM like when you went to MGM? What was the studio like?
Oh, well, it was really exciting to me, naturally, because it was show business. I mean, this is what you've dreamed of all your life, watching the movies.
It was Louis B. Mayer was in charge. Was Thalberg still around in those?
Thalberg had died just before I got there. He couldn't face it, I guess. Isn't that awful? But Mr. Mayer, everybody talked about Mr. Mayer, but Mr. Mayer was very kind and gentle to me. He even suggested things for my television show. He said, when you do your promos, don't you be on there. Let your star come on, your guest star. And he says, I'm going to be with Red this week. That was number 1. He says, now you run your commercials right into the play. He called it a play.
He had a good instinct, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He says, now what you should do is just flash onto the screen Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So I did. In later years, his advice helped me out with the investment credits with the United States government, where he proved that it wasn't a variety show, that I worked exactly as Shakespeare did. We do the play, and so that everybody would go home happy, the comedian came on, so that was my silent spot.
You know, I was talking about those early shorts you did, those Vitaphone shorts. I think it was Saul Chaplin, I'm not sure.
Yes, the songwriters.
He tells a great story, and he's got a book out. He tells a great story about when you met years later at MGM.
Yeah.
You came in and gave him a present. Could you tell that story?
Well, he had a partner, and
Sammy Kahn?
yes, and Sammy Kahn. They wrote a song, "Never Be Rude to a Dude." And every time I'd see these two guys, I'd go up and I'd start singing the song for them. They says, "How can you remember that thing?" You know? Yeah. I don't recall the a gift thing that you're talking
He
about.
said that you brought him a watch at the beginning.
Oh, yes. I used to do that all the time, give people gifts. Cigarette lighters were great in those days, and on it was engraved to so-and-so, my matchless friend. See?
He said it was so sweet of you because you remembered that many years earlier that he had given you a break.
Yes, yes. Well, he wrote the songs for the little comedies.
Well, let's go back to the Dr. Kildare series. Lionel Barrymore, was he intimidating?
He was what?
Was he scary?
No. Lionel was a wonderful guy. And I introduced him when all the exhibitors were there on stage 29. Oh, 2,000, 3,000 of these guys. And I made a mistake, and I says, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, Lionel Barrymore." And Lionel came out, and he was in his wheelchair. He said, 35 years in the theater, and B still calls me John.
He was an amazing guy, wasn't he? Because he was crippled by arthritis, and yet
He sat in the chair and still did all the whatchamacallit. When they were doing Rasputin, John said they have an argument. Ethel, they hated each other, all three of them. They didn't like each other. When Lionel died, Ethel says we went by with Jean Fowler, the author, to see her, and she didn't go to the funeral. And she says, "I didn't care much for him when he was alive. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and go to his funeral." So,
Speaking of great lines at somebody's funeral, tell me if this is true. I have heard that when Harry Cohn died...
right.
Was it you that made that?
Right.
Tell the
Well,
story.
I did it on my television show, and the shows were live in those days. No tape or anything, so there's no way of recalling it. So someone said, "Why, I see where Harry Cohn died." And over 3,000 people came to his funeral. I said, "Well, that goes to show you give the public what they want, they'll show up." Yeah, awful, huh?
That's a great story. Because I've heard it attributed to so many people, and I thought it was you. Okay, so you had done the Dr. Kildare series. Then you did a little film called Whistling in the Dark.
That was the first one that I was starred in. And that was exciting. They went to the sneak preview the first time. They get a bunch of sneaks together in those days, and they'd go see the picture. And it said, "Whistling in the Dark, Conrad Veidt, Ann Rutherford, Conrad Veidt, and then Red Skelton, see? So they previewed the picture and the cards. They read the cards and stuff. So the next week, Sylvan Simon says to me, "Want to go see the movie again tonight? We're going to preview it." I said, "Yeah, that'd be fun." Goes in, it says, "Whistling in the Dark, Conrad Veidt, Red Skelton," so on and so forth. So now the next week, he says, "We've recut and everything. Would you like to go see it again?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I've seen it twice now." I said, "I'll go." So we went together. It came on. Whistling in the Dark, Red Skelton, Conrad Veidt, and so then the next week he says to me, "You want to go see it again?" I says, "Yeah, what surprise you got this time?" He's a good one. So that come on the screen, Red Skelton in Whistling in the Dark with Conrad Veidt and all these other people. And that was the first one.
That was a surprise hit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was what they call them, sleepers. Yeah. That was nice. They call it a sleeper because everybody in the audience sat there and dozed off, you know. Yeah.
What was your character? What was the story of these films?
I was Wally. I was a radio announcer, the Fox. Ooh, you know. But the movies that I liked the best was Fuller Brushman. That was with Sylvan Simon. And Also, the Southern Yankee. I like those two. I thought they were funny because Mr. Dory Sherry was taking over at that time. So we go to the preview, and the cards were like we wrote them ourselves, you know. And I said, that's nice. And he says, we're in trouble. Simon says, what do you mean we're in trouble? He says, we're going to have to do some retakes. He says, what retakes? He says, well, number one, you were supposed to do this picture in 35 days. You brought it in at 17 days. And it was supposed to be $1 million, $1 million picture. You brought it in at $750. So he says, so? He said, well, the next time we go to the bank, they say we'll make another $700,000 picture. So they were in trouble. Now for 35 days and another $250,000 more. Now that's a lot of money in those days. We went into a rehearsal hall and I rehearsed me getting off of the horse, and I come walking in like this. I sit down on a stump and I get up real quick and I get pine needles and put on there. But as I sit down, I sit on a pine cone. 35 days we rehearsed this. 35 days. Well, I got so mad that I went out every night. I didn't drink, and I have beer, ate spaghetti and stuff. Now the scene was, I get on this horse, I weigh 195 pounds. And then they do the retake, put that in. When I get off of the horse, I weigh 235 pounds. Now, when they got ready to loop this thing, every time I came on the screen, I couldn't stop laughing. They were longer looping the picture to get me to say the line. You go, ooh, that's all I had to do is go, ooh. I'm always great for ooh lines. The first, when I came out to Metro Goldwyn Mayer, wasn't even billed in the picture. But they had signed me, and I'm supposed to be a gangster. I got the hat on, the white hat and stuff. The guy says, there's only one way to get rid of this guy, and that's to knock him off. And I say, do it. That's all. Do it. Now, I rehearsed this thing for about 3 weeks, and every day I call, and I say, did they call me today? Nope. Now I try it again. Do it. Do it. Well, do it. Now we're ready to shoot. Are you ready? They yell, camera, action. He says, the only way to get rid of this guy is to knock him off. I says, you do? And the director yelled, cut. He said, what's with you? You had that script now for over 3 weeks. I says, what are you yelling about? I knew my part backwards.
Speaking of a Southern Yankee, Buster Keaton, wasn't that based on the General?
Yes, it was supposed to be. I think there was a couple of scenes in there. There was only one original thing that was left in the picture that the writers wrote. The rest of that picture was just ad-libbed. I guess that's why I liked it. I got to do whatever I wanted to do. And Buster Keaton, it was supposed to be from the General. And Buster never came on the set. He never interfered with anything, but he had part to do with the writing, you know. And yes, a dear man.
He was a great champion of yours, wasn't he?
Well, Ed Wynn was my great champion. I liked Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and Laurel and Hardy, you know.
Well, you were compared to those great silent movie comedians, I guess, because your comedy was so physical. Do you think that's a good comparison?
Oh, I don't know. They always try to compare you with something. Like when I went on radio, they said you can, 3 sponsors wanted me. I could go on, be the first show on in that evening on Tuesday night for Swan Soap, or I could follow Bob Hope. I said, I'll follow Bob Hope. I'm either going to kill my career or a comparison. Because Luella Parsons came out with a big thing. Red Skelton is MGM's answer to Paramount's Bob Hope. And it seems like I always followed Bob Hope. Like I play state fairs and stuff in the summertime. And Bob had just been there and stuff, you know. So one night I said that, they said, you follow him everywhere you go, huh? I said, yeah. The way I look at it, when there's no more hope, then comes Skelton.
Keaton, I understand, and you tell me if this is true, I understand that he went to L.B. Mayer and wanted to form a comedy unit like the Freed unit for musicals, and with you. Is that?
Jack Cummings was the one actually that did that. And I was in a lot of Jack Cummings pictures. The Bathing Beauty, Texas Carnival. All the big pictures that I did in those days was with Cummings. I couldn't verify that. I don't know because I didn't hear anything about it.
Cummings, or Bathing Beauty. Let's talk about Bathing Beauty.
Yeah.
What was the original title for that?
It was Mr. Coed. But I was going into the Army, so they changed it to Bathing Beauty.
And what was your role in that film?
I played the lead, the love interest and everything. It was a nice picture. I was supposed to be in love with this girl, and she was trying to get me out of the college and stuff, you know.
And that was?
Basic. It was Esther Williams. Yeah.
That was a big break for her, too, wasn't it?
That was her first big picture. And kind of sad in a way. After I got out of the Army, I met her on the lot, and I said, "Hi, Esther." She says, "Oh, hello. We did a picture together, didn't we?" And I says, "Did we?" And I walked on.
But you ended up doing a couple more with her.
Yeah. She was a nice lady. Water-soaked, but nice, you know.
She said she liked your sense of humor.
Yeah.
Tell me, you were talking about Sylvan Simon, which is a name that's not familiar to a lot of people today. Tell us about it.
To me, Sylvan Simon was the only director that I've ever met outside of Frank Berzaghi that knew anything about comedy. He knew what was funny, and he let you be free and do whatever you wanted to do. I did one thing in that Southern Yankee where they turned on the camera and everybody left the set. See? Because they were breaking up and laughing and stuff. So when it was over, they shot one whole reel of this. So when they came back in, I said, that's smart. You guys really know movies, don't you? This is a silent picture that I'm doing. You can shut the sound off and stay there. Because you work better if you get a reaction from the audience, you know.
Ann Rutherford was another frequent co-star of yours.
She was a nice lady. The press department sort of killed Ann Rutherford. She was married at that time to David May, the man who had the department store. And during the war, when things were very difficult to get, they came out with a story that her house was robbed and they stole 500 pair of nylon stockings. And believe it or not, this killed her. Women couldn't get stockings. She got 500 pair of stockings. See, but they wouldn't admit it. But basically, I think that's what did it.
Then, of course, there's that other redhead that you worked frequently with.
Yes. Isn't that funny? I can't think of her name now. Arlene Dahl. She was nice.
Oh, that's a great movie, Three Little Words.
Yes. Fred Astaire was nice. He was very clandestine, you know. And I said to him one time, I said, "Did you ever cut the umbilical cord from yourself?" You know? I'd break him up.
I heard that you used to try a little blue humor, and
Yeah, and the Playboy magazine was just coming out at that time. So I said, "Go get me a couple of those magazines, will you?" So at lunch, I went in and we pasted them all, the centerfolds and all the paintings stuff all over his room. And he came in, he was very serious. And he sat down, he was sitting there thinking, all of a sudden he looked up. He gave it this, and he came out, he said, "Come here, you bastard."
but he laughed.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Fuller Brush Girl, was that with Lucille Ball? That was with Lucille.
No, I didn't do it. I only
Fuller Brush.
Fuller Brush. I did the Fuller Brush Man, and she did the Fuller Brush Girl. But she knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and she says, "Forget it," and they closed the door. You know.
Another comedian that you were in a lot of pictures with is Rags Raglan.
Yes, Rags was in burlesque. I was in burlesque with Rags Raglan. No, I was with him 3 weeks was all. It was at a in Louisville, Kentucky, and at the Garrick Theater there. And that was the only time I knew Rags and stuff, you know. But Rags was a nice man. Yeah.
And Ann Southern, you did it several
Yes,
times with her.
I loved her. I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I remember when she married Jack Pepper. It used to be an act called Salt and Pepper, and she married this guy. And everybody at the time says, you don't want to marry him. Then she married another guy. What was his name?
Robert Sterling?
Who?
Robert Sterling?
No, before that even. He was sort of a swindler, I guess, because he took her for a lot of money. I know that. Yeah, Ann Southern was nice.
You did a couple of the Maisie movies?
Yeah, and I did one Maisie movie, Maisie Get Your Man. Gosh, how can I remember all these things? You know, this is just like...
I think one of the most fun things is seeing the films in which you get to do some of your vaudeville routines. And one
Yes.
of my favorites is in Ziegfeld Follies.
Yes,
What was
with
that?
the Guzzler's Gin. Yeah, nice smooth drink. When I first did that years ago in vaudeville, the agent had a tough time selling me because I had two very outstanding things. One thing that my father did was the girl getting up in the morning, and that was my act at first. Then I did dunking the donuts. Then with the walkathons, I did Guzzler's Gin. Now, when I went into vaudeville, the agent would go in. They said, "This guy's funny. You love it." He said, "What does he do?" So, well, number one, he recites the ABCs. Huh? He recites the ABCs. What else does he do? So he does Guzzler's Gin about television. And he does it about what? Not only did they have to explain what television was, they had to explain who I was. So I had a tough time getting booked until the people saw it, and then they liked it, and it went from there. Yeah,
We have to take a, just,
yeah. Your 25 minutes is up.
I just have a couple more questions.
I just want to fix his job.
Yeah.
No, he says he had to change film 25 minutes.
Are you ready to change?
Let's
Yeah.
sit on this real good.
You mentioned a while ago about the young comedians and stuff, and obviously you want to know, has comedy changed? I'd like to tell you an incident that happened when I was in burlesque. I was playing Wheeling, West Virginia, and on Sunday there was no show, but there was a midnight show. Now we were doing a scene, it was called the Gay 90s. We were saying, "Tell me, pretty maiden," or see, burlesque in those days, they did satires on New York productions and movies. So we were doing this one, "Tell me, pretty maiden, there's any more at home like you." Now she had on a long skirt. See, I got arrested. She had on this long skirt, and I'm dressed in this old Gay 90s outfit. And I said, "Would you like to take a little walk?" And she lifts her skirt to her ankles, and she says, "I think it's going to rain." I says, "What?" She says, "I think it's going to rain." I says, "I'd like to see it clear up." And we got arrested. The whole show got arrested. And the judge says, "Did you say, were there ladies and gentlemen in the audience and you made a remark like that?" I said, "They fined everybody in the show $25, and we didn't have $25 a piece in those days, you know." But to show you how comedy has changed, things you couldn't say then, you say now, that there's no boundary. I think that's one of the things about television, is the abuse of the language.
Now, you mentioned, talking about the old days, you mentioned a walkathon. A lot of people today don't know what those are. Why don't you tell us?
A walkathon was an endurance contest, and it would run from 2 months to 6 months. These contestants would walk around the floor. I was master of ceremonies. I would go to work at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and work till 5, come in at 9 and work till 1 in the morning. You know, entertaining. Take the contestants, they were my actors and stuff, and put stuff together. So that was a great, great thing for me because I was always doing new things. The minute I'd do something that got a big laugh, I would go write it down. So finally I had a whole catalog of what can I do to wake these people up tonight, like take the water bottle that's in the container, hold it up in the air and drink out of the bottle like that. When you say this, it doesn't mean anything. But things like that are funny. That's how I got this one tooth here knocked off. The bottle broke as I lifted it up. It hit me there. I kind of hated myself for doing it. But I never went to the dentist or anything, and it's still the same as it was.
Was any of that sort of improvisation that you were able to do?
All of it.
I mean, were you able to do any of that in film?
Oh, yeah, that's why Sylvan Simon was so great, But the writers have a very tricky thing that they do. In television, for instance, I noticed it more than in the movies. In television, when you ad-lib something in at the rehearsals and stuff, first thing they would do is grab the script, take it up, mimeograph what you just said, and they'd bring the script back. So I mentioned this to Cary Grant once. He says, yes, he says, I noticed that things that I would put in, little mannerisms and stuff. And so then the writers would say to the producers and stuff, look, it's in the script. We write these things for this guy, They didn't. They merely put it down after he did it, and they created this illusion that they were doing it, which I thought was kind of sad, Writers are jealous of each other to begin with.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you about that because a lot of your comedy was physical. Did you have gag men who helped you devise those? Or was...
No. What I would do, I would write the script, an outline. I would give it to the producer, and he would get with the director, and then they would talk it out. I never met the writers. I never met. I never associated with them. Not that I was better than they, but then they would put their stuff in where I did. I remember one night in television when the director came into my room and he says, what happened? Show fell apart right in the middle. I said, no, the show didn't fall apart. I said, move the kitchen scene, either take it out or move it back further because you can't follow it. It's like following DeVito and Denny in vaudeville that came on the stage with a steamroller and ran over people and stuff on the stage, and they came out, they were flat, Well, you can't follow this with this other stuff. So he says, do you think it'll work, huh? I said, I know it would work. In the meetings, he would say, the writers would come up with a question. He'd say, wait, I'll be right back. So he'd go out, get me on the phone up in Bel Air, and explain what was going on. I said, well, why don't you try doing this? And he'd go back in and he'd say, I've got an idea. And he never said that he just talked to me or anything. So this one night, I says, take out the kitchen scene. Yeah. He says, well, I said, you can use it anytime. We don't need it in there anyhow. So I'm getting dressed. My wardrobe man's with me, and I go over to the water fountain. There's a big door, but it's open. And I can hear them out in the hall, the writers and the director talking. He says, you know what I think we'll do, fellas? We'll sacrifice. We're going to take out the kitchen scene. I said, Frank, did you hear what he just said? He says, you didn't know this was going on? That's how I found out. He'd go out and call me and then go back into the meeting and say, I've got an idea, I says, okay. So I finished dressing, and as I walked by the writers and him in the hall, I says, it's going to be a good show, fellas. Just don't touch the kitchen scene. And I walked on. Time I got home, 45 minutes later, the phone was ringing, and I'd already called New York. So the director says, don't you ever embarrass me like that again. I says, well, I don't intend to. I've already talked to Mr. Paley in New York, and you're no longer on the show.
Good for you. Let me ask you, of all the movies you did, which one you thought came off the best, which one was the most fun to work on?
All of them. each breath is an adventure with me, you know. I think they were all fun. Each day you learn something. Now, like today with the little makeup lady, how dear this invention that she has, where she sprays the makeup on. And 2 or 3 reasons. A guy with a bad breath, you can go in the next room and give it to him, you know. But she's invented this new type of, I think before long, every woman in the country will have one of these little machines where she sprays it on. It looks normal, natural, you know. Yeah. And was so natural that walking by the makeup room, one of the crew looked in and he says, "When did he go?" You know.
But you always look like you're having fun in those movies.
Yeah.
You were. Pardon me? Okay. All right.
You had enough? Mark who? Oh. Mark sounds like a hair-lipped dog.
Oh, okay.
We're just sitting here. That's great.
Your faces.
Yeah, that surprised people at home. Says, "What is he having a stroke? What is that?"
We talked about your very first film, Having a Wonderful Time. That was at RKO.
Yes,
Was that the only picture?
that's the only one at RKO. Then the other was made at Harry Cohen's. Harry Cohen liked me. He did. He liked me an awful lot. I was at his house 4 times for dinner, and he thought he came down on the set one day and he says, "Mr. Cohen's here." I said, "They're telling me to go back to he can leave the set now. His cage is clean." You know. Well, he got to laughing. He thought that was so funny, and then afterwards they said to me, "You realize who you're talking to?" I says, "Yeah." I said, "I'll give you one better than that." For 1 year, I was at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. There was a little man used to come by every day and have 4 or 5 people with him and stuff, and he'd say, "How you doing, Red?" And I says, "Fine. You stick with me. I'll get you promoted around here." So one day a guy says to me, "Do you talk to him like that all the time?" I says, "What do you mean, do I talk to him? Why? What's so special?" "So do you know who that is?" I says, "No." He says, "That's L.B. Mayer." And I says, "No kidding." I said, "Were you ever with a carnival?" He says, "No." I said, what is your name?" And I can't think of his name right now. It'll come to me in a minute. But he was one of the biggest shots there, you know.
Now, MGM, of course, was the Cadillac of studios. What
Yeah.
was RKO? What was the differences in atmosphere between, say, RKO, Columbia, Metro?
It's like eating a pizza out and eating a pizza that you've made at home. You know? It's like, who's in the next room? We don't know. At Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, it was a great dignity, you know. You never knew who you were going to run into. And always big stars and stuff, and everybody was friendly, and I never wanted to know people's last names, because if I did, I became impressed. Then you force yourself. You're trying to be cordial and stuff. The other way, you say, "How you doing?" You know, and you keep right on going.
And what about at RKO? What was it like there?
RKO was very clandestine. The stars among themselves. They gave a party. Unless you were a part of the clique, you weren't invited. And that's one of the reasons I don't like Palm Springs, actually, is because I don't like cliques. Where you go to somebody's house. You were over so-and-so's the other night, huh? Yeah, you're never invited to their place again. So we bought a place up in the mountains, my wife and I. We've been married now for 23 years, going on 23 years. And I've known her all of her life. Her father was Greg Tolan, the cinema photographer, who did the best years of our life, Wuthering Heights, Citizen Kane, few fairly good things. And I used to go over and visit, and I'd push her in her little baby carriage, you know. And I've known her all of her life. So my wife that I was married to for 28 years knew that she was dying. And she says to Lothian, if anything happens, you take care of him and don't let anyone hurt him because you know him better than anyone. And we've been friends all these years and stuff, you know. No arguments. We never have an argument. I write her a love letter every day and find new ways of telling how much I love her and stuff, you know. Because she's very dear. She'll grow on you. She's like a fungus. But a deer fungus, you know, that blossoms into a orchid, you might say.
Lovely, I think. Let's talk a little more specifically about particular films. DuBarry Was a Lady was such a great movie just because of all the great comedy talent. Could you talk about those?
It was a great movie during the war, but it was so topical that you run it today and they don't know what you're talking about. Like I see a brand new car and I say, oh my, oh, I've died and gone to heaven. And I run and I slide in and kiss the tire. Well, in the theater, the audience went in hysterics because you couldn't get tires during those days. You know, I used to have a little Bantam automobile during the war, and you know what I did? I couldn't get tires, so I tied tennis shoes on the wheel. It worked out all right, but it gave you the feeling somebody was following you. Those days, you remember when you couldn't get anything during the war days? Or no, you're too young for that. No, I'm sorry. We were building a house. We couldn't get pipes and stuff run to the sink, but it was fun. You could wash your hands and feet at the same time, you know. Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about DuBarry Was a Lady, and if you can say the name of the movie when you start telling me about it. So just say DuBarry Was a Lady.
DuBarry Was a Lady, yeah. That was with Lucille Ball. That's the first. She dyed her hair red. And that was the first picture that she ever had red hair in. She was always a blonde. And the picture was very good, had a great star in it, and the studio didn't like him at all. He says, he's not funny. It's a zero mustel. And they couldn't see his comedy. You know. But I like Zero, he liked me, you know. I like everybody. I don't dislike anybody, really and truly. I don't hate my enemies because I made them, you know.
There was also a young dancer in DuBarry Was a Lady.
Yeah, named Gene Kelly. And I danced with Gene Kelly, you know. In the picture, we danced together. But he's good. He's still good. All those people, quality never dies, you know. And for the young people that want to get into show business, they want to be stars yesterday. They shouldn't do that, you know. If you've got talent, they can put you behind a brick wall. You'll come through sooner or later. And they all worry about money, you know. Don't worry about money. It'll come to you. Because if you've got what they want, they're going to pay for it. And if you get a nice crooked agent, he'll see that you get more because he's going to get more.
Of course, speaking of talent, there was some great talent behind the cameras, too.
Yes.
And you worked with some of the best. Could you tell us a little about some of the cameramen?
The cameraman, Spradling, for instance, I loved him. And you'll have to name some of the names because offhand
Robert Surtees?
Yes. One I liked very well, very much.
Charles Rocher? Carl Freund?
No. Freund, yeah, Papa Freund. Yeah, he went with Lucy, you know. He left MGM and went with Lucille Ball. But another little gentleman who lived in our apartment building that I owned on Wilshire Boulevard. I can't think of his name.
June?
Who?
Ray June?
Yes. I love Ray June. He was nice. He was a good cameraman.
Does it take a special talent to follow comedy and as a cameraman?
A cameraman is the most important thing. If the cameraman could shoot the comedy that they have today, it would be funnier. But a director sits there and he says, hey, that's a good shot. Now they hold on it. They've lost the timing. But if you leave it up to the cameraman, he says, well, that's enough of that, boom, and it moves someplace else, you know? It would be a lot better.
Now, of course, another thing is you were there during the changeover to Technicolor, and a lot of your films were in Technicolor. Can you talk a little about the differences between working in black and white and color?
Comedy is funnier in black and white, because what I just said. They'll see one scene and they say, oh, that's great, and they hold on it too long, and it kills the timing. Where in black and white, it was just, they shoot it, boom, and keep right on going. And the comedy was timed better. The old silent movies, you run them, everything was like clockwork, I thought was nicer. But today, the television cameramen, they have the greatest opportunity in the world with all the experimental things that they're doing. And actually, television is run by the cameraman. They've made all of the adjustments and stuff. They constantly trying to improve and improvise, where before it was written down on a piece of paper and they try to follow it. But like with Greg Tolan, he didn't follow that. He was a pretty smart guy, and he would get the angles himself. The one scene where Citizen Kane is at this table, there's a fireplace and a long table. She's at one end of the table, he's at the other. He showed him how to shoot that scene for $15,000. Another guy would have come in and got real fancy with it. What he did was put black curtains all around, had a fireplace there, the table, and the two principal parts that the people come to see. They didn't come to see the rest of that stuff. Although another thing too, there's a great story used to be about Republic Studio. They go to see the Rushes, and for 10 minutes they sit there and watch just scenery. So the guy says, "What is this?" And Chesterfield, who had the studio at that time, he says, "Comes 9 o'clock, we shoot, actors or no actors."
You were at MGM during the big changeover between Louis B. Mayer and Dory Sherry.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about what the atmosphere was like, what was going on?
Well, one of the things was that when we make another picture, they'll say make another one for $750,000. And Dory Sherry lived in one of my apartment buildings. He was a nice gentleman, but the whole thing changed. On the first day of shooting, the ladies in the picture got big bouquets of flowers, and they sent me a bottle of brandy. And I said, "You guys going to need me for a couple of minutes?" They said, "No, where are you?" So I go up to Sherry's office. I walk in. I said, "Mr. Sherry in?" They says, "Yes, but I think he's rather busy." I says, "Never mind." So I messed up my hair and threw my coat back. I walked in and I says, "Mr. Brandy, I want to thank you for that bottle of sherry," and turned around and walked out. See? So a few days later, they had what they call a script reading. I never heard this before. And so everybody sits around a table and they read the script. And he read the main parts and stuff, the directions and things. And he says, and then we come to a montage. I says, "A what?" He said, "We're putting in a montage." He said, "Don't you know what a montage is?" I said, "Yeah, cover up for a bad script, isn't it?" And he got up and left the room, and everybody went home. And then I never attended one of those things again. Isn't that awful?
And shortly thereafter, you went into television.
Yeah, I went into television. I bought my contract from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. I didn't want to, and also from the William Morris office, if they were handling me. And I said to people, "Look, in my contract, I wanted to say, I don't care if you're a kid at college, the sponsor's wife, the men at the country club like the show or not. I am the sole judge of my material." See? And they signed this thing.
Is that why you chose to go into television? And
Yes. When I was a little boy, my older brother, Denny, showed me a Popular Mechanic magazine back in about 1920. And it showed television that's coming. This great, huge disc that's going to show pictures into the home. And I said, "Oh, boy." Now, all my life, up to the time I went into television, I had thought about doing it. So I said to him, I says, look, I want this in my contract because I know as much about television as any of you people do because we've all been in it 20 minutes. See? And so they laid out and left me alone. So the answer was, if I had listened to a lot of the things, I would have never been on for 20 consecutive years, you know.
Did you take any of your characters that you had developed for films into television with you?
In the film, the only one that I took was Freddie the Freeloader, and that was from the movie The Clown, and it was a remake of The Champ that Wally Berry did. And that was the only one. But Clem and Junior, rest of those things, I did in vaudeville and stuff. I did in radio, and from radio into television, you know.
Now you have a prop that you used a lot for your characters in television. Could you?
Oh yeah, you mean, well, this is one of the props, my cigar. I use it for timing. You say something and then you do this. You do this about 3 times, then you give it the next line. Gives the audience a chance to get what you're saying, you know. It's one of the reasons a lot of the present comedians I dislike for the simple reason they put themselves above the audience. A comedian should put himself beneath the audience. Give them the right to have intelligence enough to know what you're saying, what the joke is and stuff. And then the other is my hat, my little brown hat. I've had this for years, and I do all my different characters, you know, like Clem Cadillhopper. You know. A barber the other day took my hair. My hair used to be fuller, and he trimmed it all off. And I want to kill the guy because I can't do my characters now, like with Clem. He says, well, sir, since I saw you folks last, I got married. My wife's brother introduced me to him and said, would you like to meet one of my sisters? I said, you've got sisters? He says, I've got 2. One's name's Hortense and the other's name's Lassie. I said, Lassie's a dog. He said, wait till you see Hortense, you know. Then if you get through that, you just put it on, and then you do the politician, you know, the Barrymore type, you know. San Fernando Red, he says, my friends, and you are my friends. Don't tell me you're not my friend, because nobody's going to tell me who my friends are. This is going to be a clean campaign. I'm not going to throw mud at my opponent because he's a fine man, mighty fine man. And his wife, a mighty fine woman, mighty fine. What he sees in that dame he's running around with, I'll never know, you know. So you could do it. And then I would do Junior, the mean little kid, you know. It's Junior. You pulling that cat's tail? No, I'm not pulling the cat's tail. I'm holding on. He doing the pulling, you know. Then you have the Deadeye cowboy. He said, I'm one of the best shots in Texas. See that little dog over there with that fly on his tail? Watch me shoot it off. Pim. He said, wow. Well, it looks like he's going to have to learn to wag something else, don't it? But this was, and the people, when I ask for my hat when I do my concerts, I do 75 concerts a year. When I ask for the hat and it's thrown on the stage, there's applause. And I says, you watch that hat will be doing a lounge act next year at Vegas, you know.
Can we pause for a moment, just the hair?
Yeah, I was trying to find my comb.
This will be Red Skelton, take 4.
Maybe we can get it on film.
Oh, okay. Can I tell you a joke? Okay. Now, if you heard it, don't stop me because I'm dying to hear it again. There's 3 little pieces of string was walking down the street, and they go into a bar. And he says, let's celebrate. So they go in, the first little piece of string walks up, and he says, could I have a scotch and soda? And the bartender says, yes. Look, I don't serve strings. Get out of here, will you? So the kid goes out, and he tells the other little string about it, and he goes in, and he says, could I have a martini? The bartender says, look, I just told your friend I don't serve strings. Now get out of here, will you? Third one says, I'll fix him. He messes, phrases himself all like this, like, he goes in, he says, could I have he ties a knot in himself, and he messes up his hair. And he says to the bartender, could I have a beer? The bartender says, one beer, coming up. Are you a string? He says, no, I'm afraid not.
Is that an old vaudeville joke?
No. Did you hear about the 3 raisins that was murdered and they think it's a serial killing? The one I like, 2 little carrots on the way to the market. One of them fell off the truck and they took them to the hospital and the doctor says, got good news and bad news for you. Good news, you're going to be okay. Bad news, you're going to be a vegetable for the rest of your life.
Okay.
Did you ever have things that, like when I'm talking now, something comes into your mind and you've got to get it off your mind because it bothers you? I was just thinking, people in hell, where they tell people to go. Those kind of things bother me. Like, why do they put a handicap parking space in front of a liquor store? You know? And when you get a bottle of nerve tonic, the bottle of medicine for your nerves, why does it say shake well before using? Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, no.
I'm being
those are
rude.
Great. You probably had a chance to observe during your movie years and, of course, your television years, to observe other comedians, one of which was Lucille Ball.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Lucy's comedy style. What made her great?
I really don't know, dear. I'm going to have to confess something to you. Today, driving in, one of Lucy's shows was on. That's the first time I'd seen that much of one. I've never seen one of her shows all the way through. Yet I loved the dear lady. I thought she was wonderful, nice to work with and everything. But I think it was the average wife and the innocence and the way she did things. She didn't know she was funny. If she'd have known, she'd have tried, and she'd been out. But she didn't know she was funny. She couldn't have. Or she wouldn't have been so natural. Oh, whoa, hey, yeah, huh? You know, that comes naturally. They don't, you can't write this. No writer could write all the things that she did. So she must have been funny. But I'm pretty sure that they grabbed the script and mimeographed it right after she put something in so that they can say, we wrote all this ourselves. She didn't create this stuff, we did. You know.
Another great comedy star on the lot when you were was Jimmy Durante.
Yes, Jimmy was wonderful. I liked him. Hey, oh, we did a thing together. I says, hello, Jimmy, what do you know? He says, I don't know nothing. What do you know? I said, I don't know nothing. What do you know? He said, I don't know nothing. I said, well, what do you know? You know? Things like he used to do. Don't raise the bridge, lower the river, you know?
There were so many distinct comedy styles, you know, and some of you worked together, some of you didn't. And
Mickey Rooney is great. Mickey Rooney, I was at the White House, the official master of ceremonies at the President Roosevelt's birthday balls every year. And I was there for 6.5 years. He came in, he didn't have anything to do. Here's the biggest star in motion pictures at the time. He and Gable were called the kings of motion pictures. And I did an act with him. He came back and says to Mr. Mayor, there's a guy at the White House you should get. He's funny as hell. He said, what do you mean, Roosevelt? No. There's a guy there's a master of ceremonies at the Earl Theater. And a very dear friend of mine was Eleanor Roosevelt. And she, every year at the president's birthday ball, we would open the balls, all the different hotels in town. And I'd go in the limousine with her, and we'd go out, and I would do a routine. And then I'd say, now we'd like for you to meet the First Lady of the Land, the Umph Girl of Bunker Hill, Eleanor Roosevelt. And she'd walk out. And she'd stand there and look at me. She says, young man, that was uncalled for. It wasn't Bunker Hill, it was Bull Run. And the house. And then she'd take my hand, she'd say, come on, let's get to the next one. She loved doing this dear lady. She was lonesome, you know, but very dear.
what a great story. I never knew that about
Oh, I'll tell you one better than that. they used to send the car over, not all the time, but I was at the Earl Theater and the Capitol Theater in Washington for 6 years. And certain nights they'd get a phone call, and the president would have me to come over, and I'd sit there and I'd tell him jokes while he fed fellow at about 11 o'clock at night. And so one time I said to him, Mr. President, a lot of the acts that come in here, they don't think I even know you or ever seen you. Now, I know that you and some of the Secret Service men go to the little restaurant around the corner there, and if you come in, would you say hello? He said, why, certainly, Red. I'd be glad to. So I go over, and I'm glad I didn't tell the actors about that he comes in there. But we're seated there. Now comes 11 o'clock. Nothing. 11:15, nothing. 11:30, nothing. 11:45. The door opens, in comes the Secret Service man. He's in a wheelchair. As he comes in, he says, hi, Red. I said, Frank, please, not when I'm with guests. True story. He called me up at the Raleigh Hotel later, and he says, this is the biggest put on I've ever had in my life. He says, we all got to laughing afterwards. He says, it was really funny. He says, you're a nice fellow, Ed.
Oh, that's sweet. Okay, I have one last question. It's just kind of a general question. Overall, looking back on your movie career, your years at MGM, were you satisfied with the way your career went? Were you happy with it?
Oh, people walk up and say, well, it's the best picture you ever made. I said, I haven't made it yet, you know. What was sad about like those whistling pictures I did, the writers come in, and they bring in new writers, want fresh stuff. So the guy says, never seen him. Well, we'll go down and run one of his movies. So they run the movie, so they copied that movie, made it the same thing. Instead of sitting down and coming up with new things on their own, they merely imitated what they just seen. And that was one of the things. Then when we did Southern Yankee, and Sylvan Simon took his name off of the picture, he says, I didn't direct this, man. He says, and the writers, he said to them, if you had any guts, you'd take your name off the picture. He says, you've got one gag in that whole picture, and that's with a flag. I'm carrying the two flags, the North and South, and the people from the North are cheering, and the people from the South are cheering, and the wind shifts. that was theirs.
So, did you have more freedom in television then?
Oh, yeah, very much so. You could do whatever I wanted to, and when it was live, it was awful, because sometimes you'd say things that you didn't intend to say and you weren't supposed to say. Nothing vulgar or anything, but you couldn't take it back. When tape came in, then everybody got lazy, you know. Well, we can shoot that over again, you know, or we'll fill in over here with something else.
But of all the movies you made and all the movie moments, just movies, not television, what are you proudest of?
The fact that I was in them, any of them, because I think they were all an expression of that moment, and you didn't go in to make a bad movie, so I did my best that I could with what was there, and I had fun with them. Oh, I used to look forward to going to work in the morning, you know, and just think people all over the world is going to see this, and it's a sense of pride, dignity. It's all disappearing, like the traveling, the elegance of travel has disappeared now, you know. And it's the same thing with the movies. They're wonderful. But if you wanted to sit down and, like, let's take Marie Antoinette, sit down and read Marie Antoinette, the history of her, there was nothing in that movie that she did. But it was entertaining, and they were great on finding the angles to shoot it at, and the props, and the buildings, and the rebuilding all of these of the past and stuff. So you believed it. But it was happy, it was entertainment. You go into these nice, big, beautiful theaters. It hurt me so much when they start tearing down theaters. or taking a beautiful theater and make 3 or 4 out of it, for what? For another buck? It isn't worth it, because people used to go and it's a fairyland they were going to visit. And they lived this dream for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they came out of the theater and they had to go back to the humdrum of their lives each day. But it was strong enough, what they saw, to keep them going,
Well, thank you, and thank you for all the great moments you've given us in film and television, Mr. Skelton.
You're very kind. Thank you very much. Thank you for asking me. Well, better no applause at all.